WYSIWYG.
Yes, there you go.
Thanks for coming. I have a link for slides here if you want to follow along. There's some code examples, so if you want to take a look at the code repo, it's right there. Yeah, so I'm Branson Neil, Branson Neil on Twitter and bneil on Drupal.org. I work for the University of Iowa in their central IT group as an application developer. And again, you're here for the Widgetizing WYSIWYG session, and we're going to be all about CKEditor 4. So how many in this room use CKEditor 4 already on projects? Yeah, 4. Actually, who doesn't? That'll be a better indicator. Okay. I'm making a few assumptions with this presentation. We're going to be building a little Drupal module, a fairly simple one. It's going to use the concept of Drupal's hooks. So if you're not familiar with that, this links out to the documentation about hooks. And we're also going to be looking at JavaScript. So if you're used to how JavaScript behaviors and everything works in Drupal, we're not going to be doing any of that. But we're going to be using CKEditor's plugin system. And so it's a completely different JavaScript API. So that's, I think, where more of the advanced session categorization comes in. So I'll be looking at that. We'll be looking at code. But I don't think I'll be going line by line. I've got the documentation for CKEditor's API included in the presentation, so you can look at it in more detail later. So what we're covering today, what's a widget in CKEditor? We'll look at some examples in CKEditor's contrib space. We'll be looking at how we can use one of those contrib widgets in Drupal. Specifically, we'll be looking at Drupal 7. And then we're going to look at how can we create our own widget to our own suite functionality. So as you may be aware, Drupal has a lot of features that let you create a lot of structure inside your website. So we've got the concept of content types, which helps classify or helps you create pieces of content with different fields. You can display that content using different view modes. And even for like media assets, you've got different image styles of how you want to display those images. So you've already got a lot of built-in features in Drupal to help organize your content. So why do we need CKEditor widgets? Well, even though you've done a lot of planning in your Drupal site and you've got all these awesome fields, you still have blobs of WYSIWYG areas like this, and so be it. You've got a basic page content type, and someone wants to add a grid in their page or something, and you don't have something like Panelizer set up, or you're not creating individual node template files to massage the content in the way you want it. People just want to be able to make a grid inside the WYSIWYG and make 3 columns. So that's the kind of thing that a widget will let you do. You'll also be able to add little bits of advanced functionality that you wouldn't expect maybe a content editor to code in there themselves, that sort of thing. So taking a step back, for those that don't use CKEditor 4 right now, I'm just going to give a little high overview of what you get with CKEditor 4. It is a rich text editor, what you see is what you get editor. It's open source. It's one of the most accessible, or the most accessible WYSIWYG available. It has some new features in 4, something called the advanced content filter, where it's really handy, but you've got to configure it. And some people, there's a lot of, some people forget to do that and wonder why their media stuff gets stripped out or what have you, but Advanced Content Filter is a nice new feature, also known as the ACF. So if I say ACF, I mean the Advanced Content Filter. And the widget plugin that came out in 4.3 and then above. And that's where we're going to be looking at, spending most of our time today. So what is a widget? This is directly from the CKEditor documentation. But essentially, a widget is a special unit, a special instance of something inside the WYSIWYG that you can, as a developer, define a structure to, which will not let you, or which your content editors cannot destroy. So that gives you a lot of power as a developer to provide these cool little bundles of functionality. So the actual structure that you create becomes immutable inside of CKEditor. So let's say that you want to, maybe one of the best examples, most relatable examples is you've got an image and you want to create a caption for the image. So you can have, this is actually a contrib plugin, that's a contrib widget that's available on CKEditor. It's called image 2. So it lets you have a little caption button, and then you can specify a caption. And instead of just having an image tag, an img tag, it wraps everything in a figure, which is a new HTML5 element, and it creates a little fig caption inside the figure for your caption. So that's, in CKEditor, that's all an immutable structure around the actual content, which becomes the image and your caption. Because you wouldn't want, most of the content editors that I've worked with aren't that interested in hand coding the figure and the fig caption and all of that. So the actual, let's say that this actual figure, you've placed it, and then you want to easily be able to drag the whole thing around and move it, down lower in the content. Well, we'll look at this in a little bit, and you can actually do that. They make it fairly easy to move it around. And the individual pieces inside of that structure that you've created are editable. So let's say that you've popped in an image, and then you're like, well, I need to swap out the actual image in this, or I made a spelling, it was a better example. I made a spelling error in the caption, go in, edit it fairly easily. And since you've got a structure that's immutable, you can easily enforce consistent styling on that structure. So since the editors aren't going in and modifying a div to a span or changing a class, it's a lot easier to style things. And with the advanced content filter, you can actually limit, let's say in that caption field, what types of other elements are available in there. So maybe you want to allow them to bold information, you could do that, but maybe not italicize. You could limit the available elements. So let's look at some examples, and then we'll open up questions for, if you've got questions about what a widget really is. So I already talked about the enhanced image. We'll look at that briefly. I should have loaded these earlier. What was I thinking?
Oh.
Yep. You're a little slow on that. Come on. Yes.
There we go.
There we go. Doug is happy.
Yeah. Well, maybe we'll come back to this. Are there any questions so far about what I've talked about, with what a widget is? I know it'd be really great to see one in action. Why don't we?
I have one question.
Yes.
Is it still true that you have to use the CKEditor module? You cannot use the WYSIWYG API with CKEditor 4?
That is incorrect. And actually, today, when we get to in a few slides, we'll be using the WYSIWYG module instead of CKEditor.
Wow.
Because that's the one I'm most familiar with.
Me too.
So, yeah, good question. Hey, we've got one loaded. So this is actually the last one in my bullet point, Layout Manager. It's a newer one that I found. And so we've been playing around with maybe just in our group using some bootstrap grids on some sites, because for some of our people, it gives us a good standard set to just start with of different grid sizes. So this plugin actually lets you create these bootstrap appropriate classes and grids inside of the WYSIWYG. So this is what it looks like. So the button, is Layout Manager up here. It brings up a nice dialog, and you can select, it's going a little fast, but you can select the different layouts in here. And if you notice, they're nesting.
Oh.
And this is a new feature in CKEditor 4.5. You can nest widgets. So there you go. Look at that complex layout.
So these are divs with classes that are bootstrap classes.
Yep. So it's putting
Not Flexbox. Right?
it's putting like the call M12.
Yeah.
Call, yeah.
Can you configure the number of columns, or does it just 12?
So I think it's just 12. And one other thing it doesn't do right now, but I think would be a handy feature, is maybe in the edit you could, because if you, let's say you scale your device down to maybe a small screen like your phone, it doesn't do like, it doesn't default it to like
12.
all 12. It still keeps it kind of compressed. So
Okay.
that would be a really nice handy patch. But yeah, this is my favorite one actually now. Oh yeah, okay. And then here is the advanced, or the enhanced image. So here's the image, here's a caption, and it has an option for selecting a captioned image or not. So right now, since it's captioned, and if we look at the source, maybe it was a bad idea, but it has the figure in there, and if you turn off the caption, it changes it back over to an image. So here's part of the, I can show you how when you hover over a widget, everything like highlights as yellow, which means, hey, this is one widget. And this little draggy guy up here, you can, I don't know what the official term is for that, but I like to call him a draggy. That's how you, draggable, I don't know. Anyone have a better word for me?
Draggy.
Okay. So you can use that then and move it around. So.
Question.
Yeah.
Adding images to the WYSIWYG are still just metadata. They're not field entities or file entities. Correct?
So with image 2, that's correct. It's just CK editors, and like let's say you use CK Finder, you can. There's a nice integration there, but no, by default, there's actually there is an issue available on Drupal.org to maybe use media stuff with image 2. But I don't think it's gotten a lot of traction yet.
And I can't use insert to pop an image into a widget.
I don't know. I'm not sure.
You should come to my session, Doug.
Really?
Yeah.
There's a yeah. You should go to a session. So actually, next slide.
It's relevant to Drupal 7.
Yeah. So there are already some. What's that?
Yes or no?
I think we need to
You gotta go
try
to
it.
session.
Yeah.
Well, the idea is that we're probably going to replace, like, swap out the existing CKEditor plugin with a Drupal-based one, and we are preferring to use NC embed for that, for referencing stuff.
So yeah, Drupal 8 core already has a widget that's doing the core image dialog. That's a custom widget already. It's not using the CKEditor one. And then in Drupal 7 and 8, we do have entity embed, which I haven't had a chance to actually play with much. And then there's also a new media CKEditor project that moved all of the CKEditor module integration out separately to be maintained a little bit easier. And that also uses a widget. So these are things that are already available in the Drupal space, but let's say that we want to use like the layout manager, for instance, on a Drupal project. As far as I know, there isn't a Drupal contrib module that is already available to do this. So we're going to build one today.
Woo.
And we'll use this contrib widget, contrib in the sense of CKEditor in Drupal. So yeah, we'll build a module that uses the plugin layout manager in CKEditor. So we use this term a little interchangeably. CKEditor widgets are plugins. CKEditor has had the concept of plugins for a long time. and those are the ones that give you different buttons and different features. But a widget is a very special type of plugin that does all of the cool stuff I've already talked about. So, and plugins can be found in the CKEditor plugin repository, which is right here at this link, or other places that people have added them, like GitHub. So for what we're going to build, we need a few things. In our project, we need the CKEditor 4 library. We need to make sure that we have the widget plugin downloaded with the library. And then you need to use something like the CKEditor module or the WYSIWYG module to let us use one of their hooks to actually provide the widget, or provide the plugin, the widget plugins, and our new plugin. So those are all of the dependencies. So here's some documentation on getting CKEditor library. There's a new feature with CKEditor called the CKEditor Builder. And this is the way I prefer getting it. So it lets you decide like what preset you want to start with, and then what plugins you want. So what I'm going to do here is look for Layout Manager. And we're going to move it over here. And by default, it already included the widget plugin because it's a requirement of the layout plugin, or the layout manager. So I would use this then, and then you can download the optimized version of CKEditor right here. And later, when you come back and you want to add a new plugin, you can upload the build config.js file, and it'll already populate everything for you, which is handy. So, and then I'm using the WYSIWYG module, the dev version. And I chose the WYSIWYG module just because I'm more familiar with it, but I'll try to list what WYSIWYG, what the CKEditor module equivalent hook is. We'll go through. So let's build a module. We're going to call it camp widgets. So we need a campwidgets.info file and a campwidgets.module file. And again, this is in Drupal. We're doing Drupal 7. So our info file, we're not going to look at that file. It looks like this. It's just going to be one dependency on the WYSIWYG module. And for the campwidgets.module file, we're going to use hook WYSIWYG plugin, and the equivalent is hook CKEditor plugin. So we'll take a look at that. So can everyone see this? The gray part is just the comments, so you can read that later. So with the WYSIWYG module, the concept with WYSIWYG is you can pull in different WYSIWYGs. And so what we need to do is do a switch on what WYSIWYG editor we're actually using, and we only care about CKEditor. So what we're doing here is returning an array of CKEditor plugins that we want to utilize in our project. So the one that we care about here is the Layout Manager plugin. So we have a Layout Manager key. We need to tell it if there are any buttons available for this plugin, and the one that we want is called Add Layout, and that's the one that's going to give us the little, manager button in the WYSIWYG. Load true is load as a property to just load it automatically. Most plugins just say yes, use that. And internal is an important one here. That's if the plugin that you're referencing already lives in the CKEditor library itself, and it does since we used the CKEditor builder and it kind of did everything for us. We'll see later that when we create a custom plugin, we're gonna use internal calls. But that's all we need right now to get the layout manager available in the WYSIWYG configuration. So we'll go to my live demo of this. Doug, get ready. Configuration. Go to our WYSIWYG profiles. And there is a layout manager plugin available. So I've already got that selected, and let's try it out. So I'm still working on this. I don't have the actual icon that it's using from CKEditor, but it works still. So that's all that matters. So when I click it, I get my layout selector, and there we go. Now, are there any questions? Yeah.
So the CKEditor plugin existed as an add-on on CKEditor.com. and or whichever.
Yeah.
And all we had to do with our widget was with our code was to expose it.
Yep. WYSIWYG module doesn't have like an auto discovery mechanism for that. I actually don't think that CKEditor module does either.
And where did you place the add-on code?
So that's a good question. I dropped the whole. So when we use the CKEditor builder, it generates CKEditor, the library itself, and it's already embedded. It's already included in the library.
And then you showed the add.js link to grab the code separately.
What do you mean?
So if I have an existing editor,
Yeah.
do I have to rebuild it?
Yes.
Oh.
In this scenario, so you could also just drop in the plugins. So in the CKEditor library, there's a plugins folder. You could drop in your plugin there, just separately, and then it would still, this hook would still work as described.
Gotcha.
So.
With the internal true?
Yes, with the internal true. And we'll see in a little bit what internal false looks like. Yeah. So I kind of cheated. There's actually a little bit more that we did here that I just didn't show you. So we're using Hook WYSIWYG plugin, but if you notice here in our demo site, it's already loading in all the Bootstrap the classes as appropriate. It doesn't. The hook doesn't do all of that automatically. There's a plugin setting that you need to tell it to the Layout Manager plugin comes with a version of Bootstrap if you actually want to use that version inside that it comes with. But most people don't want to do that. You want to load the plugin that maybe comes with your theme or with the Bootstrap module, that sort of thing. And so, but I did just for brevity. And what I'm doing is down here I have Hook WYSIWYG editor settings alter. And what this hook lets you do is, again, when it's CKEditor, we're looking just at the top part here, the settings layout manager load Bootstrap. If we pass this into this hook, it will load that included Bootstrap code inside of the WYSIWYG for us. And on the front end, if I save this file, or this node, since I'm using the Radix theme as another quick win, it's already used, which is a Bootstrap-based theme. It's loading in the front end. So
if you're using Omega, you can't have layouts using Bootstrap classes.
No, not unless you provided the same classes yourself. Yeah.
But if Omega is my default theme, and Bootstrap's still in there enabled but not default, it can still load those into the iframe for the editor and then for the render as well. So
it would, at least as the plugin's concerned, it would only load it inside the editor. So you'd still need to do something on your end for the front end. So.
Can you explain that in just a little bit?
Sure. So, and I think I have a slide on this a little bit later. Let's see.
You gotta use Bootstrap.
Yeah, this is so the plugin that we included, the Layout Manager plugin in CKEditor, when we downloaded that plugin as part of CKEditor, it also came with a version of Bootstrap, at least the CSS that we needed for displaying those classes in the WYSIWYG. It doesn't do anything on the front end of actually visiting the web page in your theme. So you'd still need to provide in your theme or in a module those same equivalent CSS classes or styles associated with those classes. Any other questions so far? Cool. So, so right now we've got a module that is just, we're using a hook. We're pulling in a new plugin that we got from CKEditor. Well, the rest of this presentation is really looking at how could we build our own little widget ourselves. And so we're going to just build a little callout. And it's going to be like an inner wrapper or an outer wrapper, inner wrapper, and then a content area inside of it. So we have the same dependencies for our module as we already have available. So we need the CKEditor library, the widget plugin, and again, WYSIWYG or CKEditor module. So let's get started. We don't have to change our .info file at all. And what we're going to do is use the same hook CKEditor plugin to register the plugin. This is actually backwards. I should create the plugin first and then initialize it with the hook. But what we're going to do is create a plugin file that lives in, this is inside of our camp widgets module. We're going to have a plugins folder, and inside of it, I'm calling it the callout directory, and then plugin.js. So this plugin.js file is the CKEditor bit that we're going to be spending the most time in. And here are some links directly to the CKEditor API for many of the functions that are going to be included in this file. So let's take a look at it. So every CKEditor method or property is it always is prefaced with CKEditor. So that's how you know you're working with the CKEditor API. But we have the CKEditor plugins.add method and the name of our plugin, which we're calling callout, and then the following properties and methods that we're defining. So here at the top, we're referencing the we're requiring the widget plugin. We're going to have an icon for our button called callout, and that's going to be a callout.png file. And this init method is really important. That's what's going to actually initialize our plugin every time the WYSIWYG loads, the CKEditor library loads. So inside of here, we are registering, this is the new widget functionality. All we've done so far is just said, hey, I've got a plugin, and it's got a button. So the initialization method actually lets us create a widget as part of this plugin. And here's where there's a button property that gives you, like when you hover over a button, that's the help text. This template property is really important. That's the immutable like wrapper around our widget. So that's we're creating a div with a class callout and then an inner class or an inner div with callout content right now. And we also have some, this is where you can define some default text inside of your widget. And that's what I'm doing here. And later you'll see that we're going to be replacing the content of this. So down here, we have an editables, I guess, array or object with a content. You can name this anything you want. So this can, but I'm calling it content, and I'm saying, hey, we need to select this class, which is callout content. So we're saying anything inside of callout content can be editable in our widget. Allowed content this is where the advanced content filter comes into play. You can say, yeah, paragraphs, breaks, lists, that's all great in here. Images, no, or something like that. So that's what we're doing here. It's just simple, just some text. And so I think we're not gonna worry about much of this. We're not gonna worry about this yet. This required content is just saying, hey, this isn't actually a widget unless there's a div with a class callout on it. And then this upcast widget is also important. That's actually what's saying, hey, return a div with the class callout, and that's what'll like initialize the immutable structure widget cool stuff around that widget. So I know I've talked about this file a little bit. If you've got questions, ask me, but we could just switch back over to the node and try it out. So what we should find is a button that has a little icon that gives us this little toDiv widget. So I'm going to make sure that I have it configured. And I called a callout. It's not here. So that's because it's all commented out here in my hook. So going back to the slides for a second, I forgot a step here too. We want to make sure that the PNG the icon that we identified earlier is actually available. But here's where we need to initialize. We need to tell our WYSIWYG module that, hey, we've got a new plugin. So I need to uncomment out this hook. So here's where we're using a few new properties for this hook. We're defining a path to our plugin file, and that's where we're just getting the camp widgets module and then plugins and then the callout directory. We're telling it, hey, in the callout directory, we've got this plugin file, plugin.js file that we just created. Again, we have a button identified, and then we're again saying, hey, load this plugin no matter what, whenever the WYSIWYG loads. And then internal has become false. We want to tell it false now because we want it to instead use this path and file name property. Does that make sense? Okay.
Internal would be sites all libraries together.
Yes.
Did you find the button text in the JS file? Like, so I'm saying it's like callout.
Yeah. So that is a really good question. So I did define the button text for when you like hover over the button in CKEditor. This is the text inside of the WYSIWYG settings one. That's a good question, though. And then this is the name of the button inside of the plugin file, the button initialization.
This is backend config.
Yes, backend config, and this can get. You have to name this very special. So this is what's in the plugin file, and if you notice, like, it's add layout for the layout manager instead of layout manager. Which is why I couldn't load it the first time I tried doing this. But so we've saved that hook. I'm going to clear cache. Go back to our config page for the WYSIWYG. And there's our callout. Plugin. So if we go back to the test page, we should have a new button, and we do. It's this little callout microphone guy, and it creates our structure. So I'm going to remove the layout so it's a little cleaner, but it's got all of our properties we want. If I look at the source, it's got both of those divs, and it's got my default text here. Come back, I can go ahead and change this.
Good choice.
And when I come back, it's appropriately Doug instead of callout. So that's how you create a basic widget in CKEditor.
If you go to source,
Yeah.
and you like delete some of one of the divs, does the whole thing explode?
Well, it no longer becomes a widget, I believe. So
Unwidgetized.
it's unwidgetized. So if we take out this class, I think we may have problems. So the outer piece thinks it's a widget still until we save it. We just can no longer. The editable region is gone. But if we reinitialize,
You can't get rid of Doug.
yeah, Doug is here forever.
Permanent part of the
Really
system.
hard
Yeah.
to do that.
Yeah.
So I guess if you were editing the source code, it's no longer immutable. But
I am immutable. Dare I ask how we get a widget to have a dialog box for configuration?
that is a great question, and hopefully we have time for it.
All right.
Yeah, it's in the.
He's not paying me for this.
Yeah. So we've done. We can do a few things here too with the callout of this or the callout styling. In already loading in the file, I think I've got a callout, or in the module, I've got a callout.css file. I want to load that in the WYSIWYG. I also want to load that on the front end. So here's my callout CSS file. I can again use the hook WYSIWYG editor settings alter hook down here to say, hey, for the contents CSS array in the settings variable, I can specify a location to my CSS file, and using contents CSS will let you load any CSS files into your WYSIWYG. So that's one way to, the WYSIWYG module and I think CKEditor module let you define in the GUI, like load in my theme CSS. This is just the way to do it programmatically. So that's what I'm doing here.
It's not theme CSS, it's module CSS.
Yes, in this instance, yeah, I just have this callout.css file in my module.
Yes.
But you could load any CSS, I think.
And it becomes a CSS block injected in the iframe.
Yes. I am glad you're here. And then on the front end, I'm loading the CSS file just via my info file with style sheets all.
It's beautiful.
What's that?
You get the name wrong.
Oh, do I?
Uh-oh.
Oh no, what is? Oh yeah. Ah, I thought I got them all. So I don't have much in that CSS file yet. What I have at this point is just some basic padding and margin. But you can take a look at this plugin file later. And here's where we can specify dialog for our widget. So for this callout, we may want to set a width. Let the editor do that, and we also want to maybe set alignment via a class. And it would look like something like this.
Oh.
So that's what I'm going to show you. So I am not going to spend a lot of time in here, but essentially what you need to do is create inside of your plugin, inside of your plugins folder, your plugin directory. I have a dialogues folder, and inside that dialog, I'm creating a callout.js file. And inside of my plugin.js file, which is again everything that a plugin starts everywhere. That's where a plugin starts. We have down a little bit farther. I have two dialog. Here's a dialog property, which is inside of my widgets add method. I'm saying for this widget, use the callout dialog, and then you also still have to initialize a callout. You have to add the callout dialog into the CK as like an object inside of CKEditor. So you have to do this first before you can actually call it inside of a widget. And briefly, that dialog file looks something like this. And I'm not going to go through all of this, but there's a lot of CKEditor documentation and like guides on how you can build dialogues. And so basically, all of these options are defined in the API documentation. So we're basically creating the two fields, giving some common properties, for instance, for the align selector, left, right, center, or not set. And then we also have a text field for the value of our width. And there's also some special widget methods that we need in our widget method, which is initialization and data, which these go hand in hand to pass data back and forth between what the editor actually provides in the dialog and what gets injected into CKEditor and back and forth to get like default values and the like. So those are two very handy methods to look at. So I forgot which one is which, but from your dialog that we're creating in those classes and everything we're setting, to when you submit that, it needs to inject that information into your widget instance. One of these functions does that, and then the other one, when you load the editor for the first time, it does it like it stores it the correct way to come back. So.
Have you created a custom widget with a tab dialog?
I have not, no. But I've edited one before. I've edited like the default image one.
Exactly. That's just deconstruct it and repeat it, right?
Yeah, you can. So you can like get a dialog and then change it. You can alter it from there.
Sweet.
Yep. So here's my little dialog. Let's say I want it aligned left, and just use what I set for a default width. Actually, let's make it right. And it's working. And that's because I already have those classes, those style classes defined in my callout.css file.
That's beautiful.
Which are these. And because I've added these new classes to my div, I've also added in my widget add method that for the advanced content filter, I don't want to strip those classes out. Otherwise, it's not going to work. And that's what the allowed content property is.
Per widget. Per widget.
Per widget, yes.
Dig it.
Yep, because all that rolls up into the main CKEditor allowed content. Like all of that will kind of stay in sync.
And limits.
Another thing is, well, we've got this sweet widget that we created. Why not use some of the, why not create some defined styles for that widget and use the font styles dropdown? We can do that. That's just adding, I'm going to have a fancy style and then like the default styling, which we already have. I cheated and I have that already loading. There we go. I just have to turn on the font styles dropdown, but let's look at it before I say anything else. I'm going a little over. Does anyone want me to wrap up soon?
No.
Okay. So you've got to select your widget, and then the styles dropdown will show my two styles that I've created. If I am not selected on that on the widget, styles is grayed out because I don't have any other styles defined in my instance. So that's super handy. I used to hate the font styles dropdown. I hated it, but now if you can use it effectively like this for your widgets, it becomes like really useful. So if I select fancy, I get my fancy border here.
So
and you can
define a
actually
custom set of styles per widget.
Yeah, per widget. And then you can actually add more than one. So I could have primary fancy, which doesn't do a whole lot, but it did something. That's the actual primary.
Clean up an L3.
Wow. So how did I do that, you may ask? There's no easy way to do this other than there's no GUI for this. You can actually, so if you're familiar with the WYSIWYG module, you can define like font styles in there. There's a text area in that configuration. I'll show you.
You have until 2.
Okay.
Until 2.
So under CSS, there's a CSS classes text area, and this is where you can define like a key and a value. Thank you. Of in that for that dropdown by default, and so you could have some generic like styles in that, like red. I don't know. So this is available in WYSIWYG for just default for the font styles dropdown, but we don't want that. I tried seeing if I could use this to provide widget styles, and it just doesn't work. But you can add in the appropriate options inside with that settings alter hook that we've already used. So that's what I'm doing here. So in my .module file, in my hook WYSIWYG editor settings alter hook, down here a little bit farther, I have my fancy style set here, and I have my primary one. And the setting that I'm looking for is styles set. And so, and you need to provide a name. This is why I can't use the, right now you can't use the CSS text in the WYSIWYG configuration, because you can't set like a type. It's expecting all of the types of these styles to be CSS or generic font styles. But we have to provide the type and then what widget we're associating the style to, and then what class we're going to provide or going to add to that widget.
Scroll down again on that editor to the array assignment.
Styles set.
Gotcha. So you're just popping the array in there.
Yeah.
On the elder implement. Beautiful. It's not so hard.
It's just unknown. It's undocumented.
Uh-oh.
I should document it.
I think you just have.
Okay, perfect. So those are the cool things that I've found with making widgets. We haven't done anything very complex. We haven't done very complex dialogues or anything. But there's, I think, a lot of promise for the idea of these widgets. So if you want more information, Les Lim in Twin Cities did a presentation like this. There's a link to his original presentation, and then the CKEditor documentation on creating a simple widget is, very simple, and the widget they create is very similar to mine. So, any questions?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So complicated widgets, they interact with entity data or something. Is that just painful?
So a good example for that, one, you should go to Dave's session, but the entity embed module has a widget that does that, as well as the CKEditor media.
It's available in V7.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you want to help me with a Drupal 8 issue that allows you to select image styles in WYSIWYG? I could use your help. Will you please help me?
I would love to help you. I also need to report a bug. I was going to show the CKEditor, the core image dialog, but the caption button doesn't work right now. So I need to report that.
You can work on that too.
Okay. Unless it's already reported, but I haven't checked. Okay. Yeah, we'll talk.
Thanks.
Yeah. Anything else?
So your slides will be up?
Yeah, my slides are up right now.
Oh, they are. Where?
Can you add your node?
On the campsite?
Oh no, they're not. They're just available on this link right here. Yeah, the bit.ly DrupalCorn -widgets. Yep. Yes.
Where can I leave you feedback?
Oh, that's a great question. Let me go back. Let me go back to my last slide.
Please.
You can leave me feedback at 2015.drupalcorn.org/evaluation.
And should I be anywhere tomorrow?
You know what? I think you should. Does everyone enjoy this lounge area back here? Well, if you,
it's nice.
thank you. It's sweet. It's a pool. It's an old pool. That's the location of the the bleachers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was wondering.
Yeah. So that's the location of the sprint tomorrow, and you can help. I know that there's a D8 user guide sprint. There's going to be some media stuff. Obviously now there's going to be some WYSIWYG stuff going on. So this sprint's really great. So awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much.